there are working people who vote for Trump, but there are union members who vote for Trump, but Trump, is not pro-union. I mean, that's just a matter of facts.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We're going to wrap things up today by talking a little bit about the elections. It's on everyone's mind, 2024. It's all anyone's talking about, it seems. And unions were big in the news cycle this past week in the terms of Biden-Trump election. So I wanted to just kind of mention some of the reporting that's been going on out there. I'm also curious to know what listeners think and what you feel about this election, what you think unions should be doing about this election, any of that kind of thing. So just a reminder, you can call in. We'll take your call. Let me get that number. It's 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. I know there was some interesting conversation about the title and thumbnail of the episode today because flailing campaign, apparently, is a little bit of a controversial take. Personally, it seems more like a fair observation at this point. I saw one comment that said that, Biden was up in all the polls right now. Not sure what polls those are that they've seen. That's certainly not what I'm hearing, not what I'm seeing. Last I can tell, it looks like there's an overwhelming amount of media coverage casting doubts on Joe Biden's ability to continue this election, and certainly his ability to win the election. Again, whether you like Joe Biden or don't like Joe Biden, whether you plan to vote for him or not, I think it's a fair observation that his campaign ain't going so hot right now. Just my thoughts. So I did want to mention, that there were a couple press releases this week from unions reaffirming their commitment to President Biden and Vice President Harris, I noticed. That's interesting. The language was sure to mention both. But President Biden visited the union headquarters of many unions in D.C. this past week, is my understanding. I know that he certainly visited the AFL-CIO Executive Council. Of course, the AFL-CIO is the largest labor federation in the country, represents about 12 million members. Not every union's a member, but most unions are. And so that's typically the biggest voice when it comes to union politics. And they announced that the leadership unanimously reaffirmed their commitment to reelecting President Biden and Vice President Harris. So that's interesting. As Joe Biden is having a really tough week, it seems like the unions or at least some of the union leadership is, throwing him some support. CWA put out a very similar statement. And there was a lot of reporting on, these visits this week. The AP put out one. Biden looks to union leaders for support as he seeks to reassure worried Democrats. And another one from the Washington Post. Why are Democrats sticking with Biden? Asked the unions. All right. So those articles were coming out this week. There was a lot of discussion. There were, quotes from various union officials, presidents of some of these unions, who were definitely sticking with Joe Biden. There was some curious conversation, though, in a Business Insider article that was dropped this week as well. Said one of Biden's most faithful allies appears ready to break. And in this article, they alluded to maybe some concerns and questions that came up among some of these union leaders during these visits this week, that maybe it wasn't quite so rosy. In fact, they specifically pointed to UAW President Shawn Fain and AFA-CWA President Sarah Nelson as expressing some concerns about the Biden campaign's ability to win in November. So you've had that going on. Also in the background is the Teamster leader, Sean O'Brien. Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has been kind of, I think it's fair to say, he's been flirting with Republicans. He has asked to speak at both the Republican and Democratic national conventions, and he will be speaking at the Republican National Convention. He has had some conversations with Donald Trump, and there seems to be some real division happening within the Teamsters about all this. Now, Teamsters leadership is very adamant that this is all part of the process, that this has been a democratic and transparent endorsement process, that they're just basically feeling everybody out and engaging with whoever, whenever they can. But, there's some concerns have bubbled up from folks within the Teamsters, including even officers within the Teamsters, about this, about, if nothing else, the perceptions of what's going on here, of what appears like, these flirtations with Trump. There's also no debating that there are quite a few union members, both within the Teamsters and more broadly, that will vote for Donald Trump, right? So all these things are happening in the background, and we just heard coming from the news in the past 24 hours or so that this, according to Reuters, they had a new exclusive that the UAW had an emergency meeting where they are really considering next steps because they're worried that Trump is going to beat Biden. They're worried Biden about his capacity to carry out this campaign. And so, according to Reuters, there was a big meeting of the UAW's executive board late Thursday night to discuss their deep concerns with Joe Biden's ability to win and what they should do about it. So I think that's a really big deal. The UAW's endorsement is a big deal. They did endorse Biden in January, and, that was not particularly surprising. Some folks were disappointed in it. Of course, both on the left and on the right. But one issue, of course, is that just a month or so beforehand, UAW had joined the chorus of unions and others who have called for a ceasefire in Gaza, right? So they're on the opposite side of the White House when it comes to the genocide that is happening over in Gaza, funded by American tax dollars. But they did make this endorsement in January. Now there appears to be, a lot of concern on just how things are really going to shake out. So, that's, I think, going to be important to watch because the UAW endorsement is a very important one. UAW President Shawn Fain has, become a very popular leader among working folks. He has been very militant and I think strategic in his approach and has really galvanized a lot of people behind his leadership. So I think folks will be paying attention to what they do and what kind of pressure they may put on the Biden campaign, whether it's behind the scenes or out publicly.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
So, I think there's just a lot going on in terms of variables, but some things that I think it's, safe to make some assumptions about, which is we know that Donald Trump is anti-union, right? Like, that's not me making a partisan statement. It's just a reality of his positions. That's just an observation. So while there are working folks who, for various reasons, do support Donald Trump, and if you're one of those people, call in, let us know. Curious to know. Leave us a comment. So there are working people who vote for Trump, but there are union members who vote for Trump, but Trump, is not pro-union. I mean, that's just a matter of facts. So most of the unions have made this strategic decision that keeping Trump out is important to, if nothing else, keeping things from getting worse, right, for working people. There's a lot of reasons to believe that a second Trump presidency would be disastrous for unions. Right now, unions are benefiting from a National Labor Relations Board that is actually doing its job. And that is just one of many things that, could very easily change with a Trump victory. Something else that I think we can fairly observe is that Biden's path to victory is smaller and smaller and smaller by the day, right? Again, someone mentioned earlier in the comments that they thought Biden was up in all the polls, and I just don't see that. It doesn't look good. And when, the conversation around your candidacy is at this point almost entirely about your competency and your ability to continue, you've already kind of lost the narrative, right? And maybe there's a way to get that back. I don't know. But that's just a reality. It's not looking good, right? So like if your goal is to win, if that's your goal, is to win and to keep Trump out of office, folks have to be thinking carefully about how can they best actually do that. Now, something else that I've seen comments about is that Joe Biden is the most pro-union president ever, or of your lifetime. It depends on the day, the quote. And there's no debating that President Biden has made some pretty pro-union decisions. Like, that's also a fair observation. I think it's not a secret how I feel about President Biden, but I have to give credit where credit is due in terms of, massive investments in federal spending, in terms of infrastructure, clean energy, registered apprenticeships, the NLRB actually, doing its job. There are some things we can point to say, we've made some progress, right? Concrete things. But does that really matter if you're not able to win? Right? I mean, and that's, I think, something that folks have to grapple with. If you are a Biden loyalist at this point, set aside how you feel about the last 4 years or about the man's career for the last 50 years or however long he's been in politics, certainly longer than my lifetime. You have to be realistic about, can you win? And so that's, I think, the point that a lot of people are at right now. It's not the point that many of the union leaders seem to be in, UAW, being the exception potentially, but, we're seeing the AFL-CIO endorsed President Biden a long time ago, and so I have to wonder what kind of conversations have ever happened behind the scenes, but publicly all we know is a very cheerleading endorsement quite some time ago, and even to this week sticking with him, and it has to be wondered, can that really work? I think it's the issue of Palestine, I think, is something that, can't be discredited or taken out of this conversation because, labor unions, by and large, labor union members are with the public about this. And people want to see this war end. People want to see an end to this genocide that is funded and fueled by America and American tax dollars. We are all paying for this. It's what, 35,000, 40,000 dead at this point? And that's on Biden's hands. And so, I think that's a tough position to be in as a union when you're calling for a ceasefire while at the same time endorsing, the person resisting a ceasefire. I'm not saying what they should do or shouldn't do or what's good or bad. I'm just saying it's a very tough position to be in. So what I'm not sure about is, like the AFL-CIO approach and just kind of the general cowing down to Biden, especially at this stage. I'm not sure what it's accomplishing, because it looks like there's just a few options left. Biden remains as nominee, and if all the data is accurate, he will lose. And so, I mean, do you want to go down as some of the only folks vigorously defending, a failing candidacy? I don't know. If the union leadership were to step out more forcefully, would it force a change in whether or not he decides to continue? I don't know. But right now, what we see is, mostly union leadership is sticking by him and not putting any pressure that we can see on, the future of the campaign or frankly on Gaza. So, the second option is that Biden steps aside. And, if he does step aside, how does that play out with our membership? And how does that play out also with the next Democratic nominee, right? Because if we're riding with Biden to the very end, and then he does step down, where does that leave us with the new nominee? I don't know. And obviously the last course could be that he stays in and he actually wins. And, in that scenario, I guess what the unions are doing makes sense if that actually works. So, like Hamilton Nolan said, unless your real no BS judgment is that Biden will win, this is not wise. So I think I would recommend folks check out the work of Hamilton and some of the writing he's been doing about this. Right now, I find it hard to believe that folks sincerely believe sticking with Joe Biden is the best way to win in November. I think people will let loyalty get in the way sometimes. I think people will let things get in the way of making future-based decisions, right? They will let the past get in the way of the future. And so I personally am concerned as a union activist and a union member that the endorsement process for so many unions is not particularly democratic. Hell, the elections of our own officers in many unions is not particularly democratic. Right? And so that's a problem. That's a disconnect when it comes to political engagement. If I, as a member, don't really have much say-so in how this process plays out, right? And then I think that limits the effectiveness of the endorsement. If the average member perceives that these endorsements are just happening in some back room somewhere with, the big dogs behind closed doors figuring this out, what stake do we have in it? So, it's interesting. It's going to be wild to see how this plays out. Again, I recognize, we have listeners who, are pro-Trump, who are pro-Biden, and who are pro neither of those. We have listeners from across the spectrum. And, always down to hear what folks have to say about it, what you think unions should be doing. I personally think unions have a unique role and could show real leadership and could push forward a working class politics, because what bothers me, I think, the most about all of this is, whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or, some mystery DNC candidate, whoever the Democrats run, we know roughly what we're going to get. We also know certainly what we're getting out of Trump, right? So we have on the one side a deteriorating status quo, a status quo that is getting worse and declining, 5 decades of neoliberalism, preserving that status quo, or the alternative that Trump is promising, which is to make things just even worse, even quicker, right, for most people on any given issue, from human rights to the climate to certainly labor and the workplace. So, it's a tough position that I think the American people are in. I think it's a tough position that unions are in. My instinct is that more democracy is better. So the more democratic unions can be in their own operations, including how they endorse candidates, I think that's for the best of everyone involved. And we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I'm excited to have my comrade Jacob on the show next week and us kind of riff on this a little bit more and talk about it a little deeper. I'm excited to read more from Hamilton and some other folks who are putting out a lot of good information there. But again, I do recommend that Reuters exclusive about UAW considering next steps on worries Trump could beat Biden. I think that was a pretty, bombshell news article to come out late. So we'll see what plays out with it.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.